Well, good Wednesday afternoon. At least it's Wednesday afternoon where I am. Continuing our study in the book of James. I've titled this study, James, the Immediate Gospel, and trying to recognize the unique relationship that James had with Jesus that would cause him to write some of the things that he wrote and to challenge the believers of his day. The way he challenged them, he was very direct. He was very simple, and yet he would have been appealing to the Jesus that he had known, to the reality of who Jesus was as God, living as a man on earth. And so when we take that into consideration, I believe it gives us a unique challenge as we read this book to not only examine our behaviors, but to examine the attitudes that push and drive those behaviors. So James chapter 1, and today we're going to kind of go 19 through 27 and look at this passage of Scripture, these 9 verses here. And let me get my phone set here so that it won't turn off on me. And we'll jump in. So James chapter 1, we're going to start reading verse 19. He says this, "My dear brothers and sisters, take note of this. Everyone should be quick to listen, slow to speak, and slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce righteousness that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. Do not merely listen to the word and so deceive yourselves. Do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at his face in a mirror and, after looking at himself, goes away and immediately forgets what he looks like. But whoever looks intently into the perfect law that gives freedom and continues in it, not forgetting what they have heard, but doing it, they will be blessed in what they do. Those who consider themselves religious and yet do not keep a tight rein on their tongues deceive themselves, and their religion is worthless. Religion that God our Father accepts as true, as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows and their distress, and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world." This past year when we went to summer camp in 2019, we played a game, and I forgot my object lesson up here, but we played a game, and you students will recognize this game, so I'm going to demonstrate this game for you. But you would take simply 2 sticks, pick up any 2 sticks off of the ground or from your surroundings. And so parents, if you're watching this and your kids haven't watched it, challenge them with this. But you take a stick and you hold it in your hand and you say something like this: "Listen, this is a stick. This is a stick." And then you would take the 2 sticks and cross them or hold them in some unique way, and you would say, "Is this a stick?" And the challenge was for the kids to answer yes or no. So let's walk through it. Keys are kind of bulky. Listen, this is a stick. This is a stick. Is this a stick? The answer is yes. All right, now here we go. This is a stick. This is a stick. Is this a stick? The answer is no. All right, listen. This is a stick. This is a stick. Is this a stick? The answer is yes. Still confused? One more time. This is a stick. This is a stick. Is this a stick? The answer is no. Now, if you don't get it, replay the last 45 seconds or so and see if you can get it before I tell you the answer in just a minute. James uses the same technique that I used in that game in how he writes this passage. And the technique is simply using a keyword or a moniker throughout his writing to alert the readers to when he is changing patterns or when he is drawing something else and he is breaking up the moment and adding something to what he has already said. In the "this is a stick" game, or "is this a stick" game, you have to pick a word the first time you do it. And my word in my illustration was listen. and I would say, listen, this is a stick, this is a stick, is this a stick? And since I used the word listen, the answer is yes, that's a stick. The next one I said, okay, that's ready, here we go. Didn't use the word listen, so it wasn't a stick. Well, it's a simple game. You play that at camp or when you're standing in line or you're trying to kill some time. And it occupies kids because they get really, really frustrated. And I mean, they'll try to look at the sticks and see how you're crossing them. They'll try to determine all sorts of different things that don't even make a lot of sense, but they're confused, and so they're trying to do it. Well, when James writes this book, he breaks it up multiple times by saying this, my dear brothers and sisters. And so as he's doing this, he's using these key words to shift focus. He's focused on one thing, now he's moving over into this different area, and he's going to draw their attention to something else. And when he does this, it's almost like he's catching his breath. And in so doing, he's reminding them of how much he values them and how they are equals in their service to God. It's very unique considering the fact that he would have been one of the individuals who could have had this claim where he could have laid claim to a special revelation from God or a special system from God. And so he didn't do that. So here we go. He kicks his letter off by reminding us and by telling his friends and followers of Jesus that they should rejoice when they have trials and difficulties. And then from that, he rolls into this idea that, hey, guess what? Some of those trials and difficulties are a result of your own selfish desires and your own selfish interest. Huge challenge. I mean, it's really confrontational in the sense that he's trying to get them to look within themselves. He doesn't say it in such a confrontational tone, or at least I don't read it that way, but it's a huge confrontation as we have to reflect on who we are. And so then he moves from the fact that we're going to have these trials and temptations and they're produced by our own selfish desires into this second section where he begins to notice that how our desire to be right motivates what we do. And how our desire to be the ones that are correct, the ones that have the final answer, the ones that know the real truth, the ones that really understand the situation. And ultimately he says this, it causes us to act religiously when what we're doing is actually an affront to God. So let's look at how he challenges us with this. I already read the passage to you beginning there in verse 19, so that's where we're going to jump back to and look at it. And so the first thing that James challenges us with when he talks about how angry are you, because that's really what he's beginning to turn around here. And the overlying question in this passage is, how angry are you? Now, of course, it's easy to take a passage and try to interpret it in light of current day events, which is true because it is applicable. But how angry are you? If you're a kid, I mean, how angry do you get when your parents tell you to do something or when you have responsibilities to do? How angry do you get? If you're a parent, how angry do you get when someone disagrees with you or maybe somebody doesn't do what they've been told to do as in a child or a student or a coworker or something like that? If you have siblings, how angry do you get? How angry do I get? How angry do we get when things don't go our way? When the sibling gets to pick the game or gets to pick the food or gets to pick whatever it is, how angry are we? And the truth is, many of us are very angry people. We walk around as angry people. And so James kind of exposes this, and he exposes it by pointing out a few particular behavior patterns that we can notice in our lives. The first one is this, our response to outside input. Quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. All three of those are put together. Quick to speak, slow to speak, or quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. Think about it like this. Listening means this. It's not just hearing what someone says, but it's giving value to who they are and to where their opinions and their thoughts and their ideas are coming from. Now, I know that some will want to twist that and say, oh, Daniel's saying that we should listen to everybody and everybody's opinion is equal. I'm not saying that. But I am saying that when James says we should be quick to listen, this doesn't just mean that we stop and say, okay, tell me what you want to say. Hurry up. Kids, that's not listening. When a teacher tries to teach you something in a minute and a half that you had 45 minutes in the classroom to learn, but because everyone was talking and distracted and everything else, you don't learn in a minute and a half what they're trying to teach you, and you walk out of that classroom frustrated. When a coach has been trying to run drills with you all practice, and he's been talking about where you need to be at and all these sorts of things, and you and your buddies are talking the entire time, and then 2 minutes before practice is over with, you all of a sudden want to pay attention because the coach starts talking about the game that's coming up. Doesn't work that way. Quick to listen means that we're ready to hear and we're willing to give someone credence. In other words, we value what they have to say. This is a difficult thing to do. We're self-absorbed people. And to give value to someone else means giving them my time. It means giving them my energy. It's allowing them to take energy from me as they speak. So quick to listen, slow to speak. What that means is we're ready to absorb. We're ready to listen. Remember, if you're a kid and you're watching 13, 14, 15, man, right now at this point in your life, and it's awesome, you're beginning to develop your own opinions, you're beginning to learn things, you're beginning to articulate your own ideas and views on things. And parents, if you're watching, you need to learn to listen. I need to learn to listen better as a parent, but we need to learn to listen to our kids. But kids, listen to me. Do you remember what it was like when you were 6 years old and your papa was teaching you how to use a hammer or something? Man, you were just paying, what? You watched. You were absorbing it. Well, when it means we're slow to speak, it means we absorb. Not only do we give people time to say what they want to say, but then we actually value what they said and allow it to just wash over us. We just absorb it, which means we get quiet. We allow ourselves to enter into the same space that they're in. We try to, it's called empathy. It's not sympathy. We don't feel bad for them. We try to actually understand what they experienced. And we begin to feel what they felt. Quick to listen, slow to speak. How do we respond to outside input? You remember who's writing this? James, the brother of Jesus. Remember who Jesus is. And yet he came to earth and he walked around with 12 guys who all had their own opinion, all had their own desires. And it's clear from the way the Gospels record their interactions that Jesus allowed those guys to speak. Now, every now and then he'd say, you have no clue what you're talking about. He'd say to the Pharisees, man, you guys are ridiculous. But he listened to people. And this is James telling us this, his brother. I think of the book, it's called The German Girl. And it's a fictional book, but it's kind of loosely based on some true events. And it shares the story of a young lady growing up in Germany in the late 30s. And she's a Jewish girl. But yet physically she looks like the epitome of a German. She's tall, she has long blonde hair. And so she is seen as the German girl. And in fact, a photograph is taken of her, unbeknownst to her, and put on the front of a magazine that was used for Nazi propaganda at that time. And yet her family were Jews, and they were looking for a way to flee the country. But yet she looks like the absolute epitome of a German. And nobody would listen to how this girl felt and how these situations made her uncomfortable. Her family didn't want to hear it because to some degree, they were ashamed of how she looked. The Germans, of course, didn't want to hear it because even though she looked German, she was a Jew. She was all that was wrong in Germany to many of them's minds. And the only person that would listen to her was her friend Leo. And it goes through the book and how ultimately how devastating it was when she lost her friend. And as I read that book, I'm just reminded that the author is giving us a beautiful glimpse into something that James tells us here that is one of the things that God values. And that is people need to be heard. Which means many times we should have a whole lot less to say. We need to hear people. Secondly, slow to anger. Man, there is such a strong, I don't want to say dig, but it is a dig. There's such a strong undercurrent with that statement here. I want you to think about something. Why would James say, quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger? Unless one of the previous two things leads to anger. Think about that. Quick to speak, or quick to listen, slow to speak, slow to anger. Why does the third one have to be there? I think it's there because what James is telling us is this. We're not going to like what we hear. And what do we do when we don't like what we hear? What do you guys and girls do when you wake up in the morning and your parents have different expectations for you than you have for yourself? Parents, what do you do when you get to work and your coworkers have different expectations than you have for yourself? Maybe even they're your employees and they have different expectations. Maybe they're your friends. Maybe they're your family. Think about the political issues that are confronting our world today. And by the way, they're not political issues. We make them political issues because we like to put them in segments to determine who's right and who's wrong. These are actual real life issues that are much determined by what is happening here. Slow to anger. The reality of it is this. Listening to others is probably going to make you angry. And James caps it off by saying, by the way, your anger accomplishes nothing. Let me read that to you again. He says this. Because human anger does not produce the righteousness. And remember, the word righteous there means to do what is right, to do what is good. Human anger does not produce the good works that God desires. Now you think about that for just a minute. Kids, you feel like your parents have trapped you with endless chores, endless responsibilities, things you don't understand, obligations of behavior that your friends don't have, all these sorts of things. And you feel like you're trapped. And so you respond with this human anger. Guess what? That's not going to produce good works. Parents, you feel like the world maybe around you is difficult. Maybe it's not the way you want it to be. Maybe you're not seeing the culture shaped the way you want to see it shaped. And so we begin to lash out and we begin to tell everybody what is wrong with them. Guess what? That's not going to produce the good works that God has called us to. Anger, and here's why. Anger will prompt us to correct others. And then here's the flip side of that. When people are not easily corrected, anger will push past correction to coercion. Now you think about that for just a minute. Kids, think about your behavior with your parents. Think about your behavior with your teachers, with your peers. Once people won't respond to what you want, what do we begin to do? We look for ways to manipulate them. We look for ways to control them. The exact opposite of what Jesus did when he was on the earth. And James knew that. James lived that. James was his brother. James goes to Jesus one day, or we believe he did. He was one of the group that goes to Jesus and says, man, get yourself to the house. And Jesus said, I've got responsibilities to do. And here he is years later writing, hey, you know what? You let your anger rule you, and it's going to destroy what God wants people to do. It's going to lead us to coercion. Parents, you know this. You get angry with your kids, what do? You just crank down on them. You just make them do what you want them to do. Does that lead to healthy relationships? Does that lead to good works? Does that lead to anything that is good? It doesn't. And then here's the thing that James says. He says, by the way, you need to look at your anger, folks. He said, your anger is revealing what's happening inside of you. He said, you're not angry because of who they are. You're angry because of who you are. That is it's so difficult to absorb that and think through that. It's so easy to prescribe the problems of the world and the problems of our life to others. So let me read that to you again. Therefore, he says this, don't be slow to become angry, because human anger does not produce the righteousness that God desires, the good works that God desires. Therefore, get rid of all moral filth and the evil that is so prevalent, and humbly accept the word planted in you, which can save you. What James is saying is, your ability, your willingness to quickly become angry is a result of your own moral filth. What do you mean, moral filth? Well, go back up a few verses. Go back up to verse 14. What does he say in verse 14? He says this. For Verse 14, but each person is tempted when they are dragged away by their own evil desire and enticed. Anger reveals what's happening in us. And what anger really reveals is this, how self-absorbed we are. That's the moral filth. The filth that is within me comes from me saying, I want what I want. And ultimately, it is worth it to trample upon others to get what I want. There is not a single sin in the world in which the individual committing the sin did not choose self over others. Now, you think about that for just a minute. There is not a single wrong thing done in the world, a single thing that misses the mark that did not begin with the individual, that did not begin without the individual choosing self over others. By the way, guess what that violates? Jesus' commands. Remember the lawyer came to him and said, Jesus, what are the commands? Jesus said, well, you tell them what they think they are. And the guy says, well, I think they're loving God and loving others. And Jesus is like, yeah, you got it. That's it. Everything is built upon those two principles. Loving God, embrace faith, hold on to hope, do good, love your neighbor, value others, serve others, do good. And so what happens then? Well, what happens? How angry are you? How angry am I? Where is that leading us to? Well, it leads us into this different behavior because he says this, do not merely listen to the word, but do what it says. Anyone who listens to the word but does not do what it says is like someone who looks at the face in the mirror and after looking at himself goes away and forgets what he looks like. James says this, you got to just go out there and begin to do it. Your behavior will change as you serve others. He's like, people are forgetting what they want. They want one thing one day and want another thing the next day. It's because they're self-absorbed. So James says this, you need to just jump on out there and start doing it. And your behavior will change as you serve others. You will see the opportunity to serve. I hear sometimes, and I know it's said, it's a religious cliche, and I know it's said with good intentions, but it's so wrong. Pray that God will give you the opportunity. Listen to me, adults, that's probably in your vocabulary. Kids, it's probably not in yours yet. Kids, here's the deal. Kick it out of your vocabulary. Never let it in. Adults, destroy it. The opportunity is there. In fact, James points to us in just a minute. He's like, let me show you how simple the opportunity is. Get that out of your vocabulary. All right? Your behavior will change as you serve others. You will see the opportunity to serve. Your focus will last as you serve others. You won't forget what you're supposed to be doing. James says, man, this guy goes, he looks in the mirror, and he looks in the mirror and looks at himself, walks away and forgets what he looks like. For the last several weeks, I've kind of had this challenge to myself to really improve some things that I'm responsible for here at the church. And when I wake up every morning with that on my mind, or I sit down at my desk every day and I write that right there across the top of my page, guess what I've been able to do? I've been able to maintain my focus as my day goes on. Because I know my purpose. I know what I need to do. And I keep going. And here's what happens when you know your purpose. And as your focus holds on, you apologize. You apologize. Because you realize that you became self-absorbed and you did something that hurt another person. And you look at that person, if it's opportunity to, and you say to that person, I am sorry. And I did wrong. And I put myself over you. You apologize, you change your behavior. You try to change your behavior. You work towards changing your behavior. Your words, here's the thing, your words will ultimately reveal our true focus. Remember, the challenge was to shut your mouth. Be quick to what? Listen, slow to speak. James comes back to that. He circles all the way around. He says, oh, by the way, here's the thing. Those who consider themselves religious and do not keep a tight rein on their tongue deceive themselves. That is such a powerful statement there. He's like, your words are going to reveal who you truly are. The way we talk to others, the way we talk about others. Do we dismiss their concerns? Do we denigrate their position? Do we deny their experiences? Notice where the danger is. It's not with them. The danger is with deceiving ourselves. James says, by the way, if you don't keep your tongue shut and you don't tie yourself down and start paying attention to what you're doing, it's not that you're going to destroy them, it's you're deceiving yourself. And then he closes with this, and I'm just going to wrap it up right here because we're right about our mark here. Don't overthink it. Don't overthink it. So what do you mean? How do you mean overthink it? Well, remember I told you just a minute ago we need to get some words out of our vocabulary, pray that God will give me the opportunity. I mean, I know what people really are trying to say by that, but say what you're really trying to say. Pray that I'll have the courage. Pray that I'll have the desire. Quit saying, pray that God will give me the opportunity. Listen to this. True religion that God our Father accepts as pure and faultless is this: to look after orphans and widows in their distress and to keep oneself from being polluted by the world. Here's what James is saying. Don't overthink it. Go out and start serving others and look for the powerless. For me today, here's what that means. Quit blaming economic theories. Quit saying that it's political conspiracies. Look for the powerless. Look for the hurting. Look for the helpless. And put your back to the work. God bless you. Think about James, the immediate gospel. Challenge you to jump into chapter 2 and start reading it before next week. God bless you.